A hearty welcome to New England Authors with Kameel Nasr, where we explore the amazingly rich talent and stories of our region. We're produced here in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and broadcast on stations across New England. And today we have Jane Willan, pastor of the United Church of Christ in Paxton, Massachusetts. Welcome, Jane.
Nice to be here.
This is the first time I've had a pastor. You are the Belva Duncan Award winner for pastoral excellence, and you were a delegate to the Witness Board, Justice and Witness Board of the United Church of Christ, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Unfortunately, you being interviewed by someone who knows a lot about the history of religion, and so I want to ask you about that, but I know that you have written a novel, in fact, a mystery novel. So let's talk about that a little bit first.
Sure.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, it's a novel set in Wales, and it does have a religious theme to it, actually.
Yes.
So it's set in Wales, and it's in a religious community of women. They're nuns, but they're Anglican nuns.
Anglican nuns.
Which I was inspired by Call the Midwife. Do you watch Call the Midwife?
No, I don't watch that, but
yes, right.
yeah.
Well, I'm not supposed to ask you questions. Okay, so anyways, I was inspired by that because I like the idea of women working together in community, and I wanted to just do something with that. And so I had my setting be in Wales, which I love, and with a community of women, and also struggling with the changes in the church in 2018. So
yes,
I put it all together in a mystery.
Now, this is a long shot to go from New England to Wales,
It is,
and in a convent. First of all, did you have any experience in cloistered life personally?
No, not at all. But I love nuns. I love to read about nuns. I love nun movies, nun books. So, but I would be a terrible nun.
What's the draw? What's the draw of that?
What's the draw? That's a good question. I think some of it is idealization. So I'm not a nun. I'm not cloistered. So I really probably don't know, quite the day-to-day life of it. But from a distance, I like the idea of a community of people being together as they live out their faith in a very deliberate way.
Yeah.
As a pastor, you don't really do that. I mean, you try to, you get close to it, but it's not the same, I think, as people who really regulate every day.
It's very different,
through prayer and song and stuff.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I once, believe it or not, one day I was in a Trappist monastery in Iowa. And, well, I was there a lot, but one time they asked us to help a Trappistine monastery of women, a convent. And they were such delightful people, just really, if I was a woman, I would have joined them right away. Because there was a group of maybe a dozen, 14 women, and they were just really hearts of gold. So now here we have Sister Agatha, and you introduce her right at the beginning. She walks into a place and finds the sexton dead, right?
Yeah, she finds a dead body.
She finds a dead body.
So I wanted to open it.
Yeah.
It was my first book, so I wanted to open it with really a punch. And so I had the dead body right there.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so the police are called. They think, oh, this is an accident. But she reads murder mysteries, right?
Actually, she reads them and she's writing one. So she's writing a murder mystery as she's solving a murder. So that's the theme throughout all the books.
And so she doesn't believe the police that it's...
no, it's a classic. The town constable is kind of bumbling and he doesn't think it's really a murder, which is a constant, that's a theme throughout all the English mysteries. So you have to get rid of the local police somehow so that your amateur detective can solve the crime.
And she has a friend, Father Selwyn. And so how do they cooperate together?
Well, he's both kind of a friend, a colleague, and then they solve the mystery together. So technically, he's the literary sidekick. He's kind of the Watson to Holmes. And so you need someone. I found. At first he wasn't in the story. He wasn't there at all. And then he just appeared one day. And it was fun writing about him. And I realized that it allowed me to have another character for Sister Agatha to kind of bounce her ideas across, as she tries to solve the mystery. And then he sort of holds her back a little bit because she's very impulsive and funny, and he's a little bit more serious. So they're a good combination.
Yeah, so I know Sister Agatha is a nun. Is she partly you?
Well, probably. Yeah.
Yeah?
I hate to say it.
Yeah, because you read murder mysteries,
I do.
right?
And I'm writing one, so yes.
So I'm crying.
I actually think that every nun in it is a little bit of me, except Sister Calvin. He's very organized and always proper and together. But I like to think I'm a little bit of the Reverend Mother because she has a lot more grace and she's kinder and more compassionate than Agatha.
And how did you research this? Did you go to Wales?
No, I didn't. I said it in Wales because as I was writing it, I wanted it to be in my happy place. So I needed like a really... And when I was a kid, I read How Green Was My Valley, and I loved it.
Yeah.
And, there's that kid in it, it's set in Wales, and all my life, I've always seen Wales as a little bit magical, kind of a Narnia, So I just thought, well, I'm just going to put it there so it'll be fun because no one else will ever read it except for me. I'll just probably just write it. And so I set it in Wales, and the way I researched Wales was simply to go online and Google Wales.
I see.
But I did go to Wales then after I was done with it. When it was ready to be printed, actually it had already, I think, been printed or published. It wasn't released yet. My husband and I went to Wales as our 10th wedding anniversary.
Oh, I see. But there's a lot of details of convent life.
Yeah, there is.
Now, how did you get to? You must have known something about it.
Well, I am a member of the ordained clergy.
Yes.
So I do get some of it. And then I told you I love nuns, so I've been reading nun stories. And then I just did fast research. You can just Google anything now and quickly read. And so that's what I did.
So tell us a little about the story. There's a young sister, and I'm not going to pronounce it, Gwen?
Gwynedd.
Gwynedd? Mm-hmm. Gwynedd.
Yeah.
There's in the Welsh language, there's all these double consonants and stuff like that. So can you tell us a little about her?
Well, Gwynedd is young, and the rest of the convent is aging.
Right.
So they're past or at retirement age. But Gwynedd is in her 20s, and she stumbles upon them accidentally, which you find out early on in the book. She actually uses them as a place to kind of have a roof over her head.
Yeah.
But while she's there, she falls in love with them.
Yes.
And she falls in love with sort of the whole religious life. And so if you read the book, you'll see that, in the end, that all works out for Gwynedd. So Sister Gwynedd is, to me, kind of represents the more youthful nature of those people entering the church in their 20s and 30s, as opposed to those who've been in the church their whole lives.
So this is New England Authors with Kameel Nasr, and we have the great pleasure of talking with Reverend Jane Willan of the United Church of Christ. What's the origin of the United Church of Christ? Is it anything to do with Wales or England?
No,
Where's it come from? I'm sorry my ignorance about that.
The United Church of Christ is 4 different groups of churches that came together in 1957.
Oh, yes.
We're very far to the left, progressive. UUC is our, UCC, and we're almost Unitarians, only we're not quite.
Was there an effort to unite with the Unitarians?
No. I mean, we're Trinitarian, so we couldn't be Unitarian.
Here's a theological question.
Yes.
Do you recite the Nicene Creed?
No, we're non-creedal.
I see. That's great.
But we have it, and we kind of use it.
Because I write against the Nicene Creed. You
don't like the Nicene Creed?
No, the Nicene Creed, I wish that churches would stop using it because you should know the history of it before you use it.
Yeah,
anyway, I'm sorry. I'm sorry
I would agree.
To go in that. So this is your first mystery?
Yes.
Do you write other things too?
Well, I write a sermon every week.
Oh, yes, of course.
I write an article for the Worcester Telegram and Gazette every now and then. And I write, as a pastor, you write a lot. You write kind of all the time. You're writing newsletter articles. You write, letters to people. And so I've just been writing for about 20 years. But then I decided to write something that would be just, like I was writing the great American novel, kind of.
Yes.
And I'm not very good at that. I was not having fun. So I thought, I'm going to write something fun. And so I wrote a book about nuns in Wales. It was fun. It was terribly fun.
So what's the philosophy of it?
Of the book?
Yeah.
Well, the theme of the book, I think, is sort of recovery and rejuvenation and moving forward, even in the world that's throwing you a lot of problems. So one of the characters fights a gambling addiction, and then Sister Gwynedd has possibly murdered her boyfriend, and the convent, or the abbey rather, is coming under terrible financial stress. But everybody is redeemed almost at the end.
Yes. Well, there's very few nuns now. There was 10 nuns left in this abbey that had 100 at one time.
19. There's 19 nuns left.
19,
Yes.
19, but it had
like 100.
Yes.
Which is pretty typical, you know.
It is.
You know, in the 60s, convents were filled. And now, 50 years later, hardly any convents, you know. So
yeah. Well, this segues into the next point. Now, you wrote co-authored another book. What's the name? What was the title of it?
That's,
it was
Jumpstart This Church, and it's a book about church growth.
Yes, and you talk about how the churches are going down in attendance and so on. Many are closing. How many? You said a certain number are closing every year, 5,000 or something.
Yeah, it's
are closing.
A horrible number like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's your solution to that?
Well, I'm actually in a church right now in Paxton, the Congregational Church of Paxton, and it's growing and thriving. One solution is leadership, you know, really strong leadership.
Yes.
Another is changing with the world. Another is trying to not live in the past, you know, which is hard for the church, but, you know, the near distant past, like the 70s. There's a book or an article called The Church, you know, 1950 just called and they want my church back. Because people try to return to kind of the 50s and 60s and 70s.
Right.
But those days are long over.
Yeah.
So I think if churches could be more forward-looking, that would help. I don't know what the solution is. I really don't.
What in your church, what do you do to...
We're just, what do? We try to make worship meaningful and progressive, but also traditional. Like, we don't throw tradition out, but we try to adapt it to where people are at.
Okay, so when I went to church, I was brought up in the Lutheran faith, which is kind of weird for a Palestinian Lebanese to be a Lutheran, but anyway, I grew up in that faith, and all the ministers were male.
Yes.
Did you encounter any resistance to yourself personally?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, sometimes people just want a man as their pastor. And I really have never had resistance in getting hired. I've had 4 churches, and they've all been wonderful. But the sexism that I think I do encounter, that a lot of women in leadership do, is that as a woman, you can't get away with very much. You know, a man can be bumbling, or he can be loud, or he can be aggressive, or he can be, and all these things are fine. He's still good. But a woman cannot do that. So you really can't make mistakes in the way I think a straight white male can.
Yeah, but you would also bring something different to the ministry than a man would.
I think women are the better ministers because we're nurturing and we're perceptive and we understand dynamics between people.
Yes.
And those are crucial elements to a good church.
I want to quote from that book. You know, you said, "Never make life-changing decisions based on a paint job, and never photograph your prospective church in the soft glow of a New England sunset." And you were talking about how you came to Paxton. So give us the story of that. It's a very interesting story.
To be perfectly honest, that's how I came to Grafton. That was my church before Paxton.
Grafton.
Well, the church I did look at the church in a beautiful New England sunset. So I didn't notice that the paint was peeling and the place was really run down. And those are not good signs about a church.
Yeah.
So I'm being a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but the point I think I'm making in that part of the book is that you should make your physical space really welcoming and beautiful. And that's important because when people see it, you know, you want to give the impression that you're alive. And so if your church is falling apart, look, physically, you don't give that, it's all a package in one sense, that everything should be living and moving and breathing.
Yeah, you came from Iowa, right? How did you wind up where you are now?
In New England? My husband got a job in Andover, Massachusetts, and we said, okay, let's do it. But I had been here before. I was ordained in Rhode Island, and I loved the East Coast. But when I was first ordained, there weren't very many prospects for me in New England because I was so just new to it. So my conference minister, which is like a bishop, said to me, "Why don't you try Iowa?" And I was like, "I don't even know where that is." So, yeah.
Yes.
But I did. I sent my profile, which is like a big resume, out, and I really had a great experience in Iowa. I was in 2 different churches.
I love Iowa. It's a great place. The people are great. Yeah.
They're very nice.
You came from Ohio originally, right?
I grew up in Ohio.
Yeah.
And I went to Hiram College, and then I went to Vanderbilt Divinity School.
Yeah.
So that's where I did my divinity.
So what was your seminary like? What did you kind of learn? What did you and what did you do in as a minister that was different from what you learned?
Well, lots of things. Well, Vanderbilt was a great experience. There are seminaries and there are divinity schools, and divinity schools are university-based and interdenominational. So that's very different than a seminary that's usually one denomination and also kind of freestanding of its own.
Right.
So in a divinity school like Vanderbilt, you get this really broad education of theology, biblical studies, Greek, Hebrew, pastoral care, everything. It's a very, very good immersion. The problem probably, although it's not really a problem, but it's very academic, and then when you find yourself in a small church surrounded by Iowa farmers, it's a very different experience. But it's like anything. When you go to law school, you don't learn how to be a lawyer. You learn about the law.
Right.
Divinity school is the same way. You learn theology, but you don't necessarily learn how to run a board meeting or balance a budget or fix the boiler. That's a biggie.
Oh, I see. So anyway, this was a really The Shadow of Death, Sister Agatha mystery. Really delightful book. I'm not going to give the ending away. Things are not like they seem. It has an ending that I didn't even guess about, and I'm pretty good at this kind of things. What's your next writing project? Are you doing a sequel? Is there is Sister Agatha coming back again?
There's October 9th, the Hour of Death comes out. It's Epiphany. No, it's Advent. So this is in ordinary time, and then the next one is Advent, and the third one, which I'm writing right now, is during Epiphany.
Oh, I see.
And the fourth one will be during Lent.
Oh, so a 4 series then. Is Sister Agatha going to be in all of those?
Yes.
Yeah, and there's a murder in each one?
There's a dead body every time.
There's a dead body. Yeah, that's how mysteries are. Yeah. And then do you want the books to stand on their own, or do you want them to flow with one another? Can you just pick up one book and read it?
I want you to be able to pick up one book and read it, but maybe that will make you want to read the rest of the series too.
So you write a lot of sermons, and they must be a lot different than writing something like this. What's the writing process like for sermons as opposed to fiction?
That's a good question, because I use Scrivener, which is a software to help you write, and so I use Scrivener for both sermons and I use the short story format out of Scrivener for my sermons. So what's the difference? Well, sermon is oral tradition. So even though I write it out word for word, which not most pastors do that, but I do, it's still oral tradition. So it has to come across as a sound right, So it's really different writing. So I always kind of I follow the scripture. You have a certain scripture, and you follow that, and you pull out of it meaning, and then I illustrate it, and I wrap it up. So I try to have every maybe 15-minute sermon, 20-minute sermon, have something that everybody can take away from it.
Right.
And it has to be very compact, and it has to have a lot of punch to it right away.
It usually starts with a story, right?
I usually start with a story or a joke or something, and then I usually recap the scripture, and then I pull out some significant things from the scripture, and then I illustrate them with more funny stories, and then I conclude. So I have a formula.
And as opposed to writing this fiction
well, this one, my first one, I just sat down and just wrote, the beginning, I just wrote the story of Sister Gwen, who I loved, and I just wrote that, and then I had to make the rest of the book fit that story about Gwen. And then I killed someone off, and it didn't work.
Gwen is the one who
maybe killed her.
Yes.
Her boyfriend.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. So I wrote that whole storyline, and then I kind of had to fit the novel around it.
Yeah.
And then I killed someone, the dead body, And my writing partner, who I work with, a Lutheran pastor, by the way,
Yeah.
she read it and said, "Oh, he would never have. Oh, no, that's not nice. Don't have him kill.
Yeah.
Have it just be like he didn't mean to do it.
Right.
So, or she didn't mean to do it,
yeah.
depending who did it. And so then my agent read it and said, "Oh, that's got to be a murder. You can't you can't pretend like you." So anyway, so I had to rewrite it. And then when I wrote this one, I didn't know how it ended until about halfway through, which is really a disaster. So then when I wrote the second one, I thought I'll be better. But when I wrote the second one, I had a contract for it, and I had to rewrite a lot of this one. So I ended up not having enough time to do all that to the second one. So I wrote the second one about 5 or 6 weeks, and then I had lots of rewriting. So now I'm writing the third one, and I'm much better. So for the third one, I've written the last chapter, where the detective explains everything that happened.
Right.
So now I know who killed who.
Oh, I see.
That's
Good.
Good.
Yeah. That's like outlining almost.
And then I wrote the prologue.
Yeah.
So I've got the beginning and the ending.
Yeah.
So now I just have to fill in the middle.
Yeah. So what do your parishioners think about? My pastor, she's a murder mystery writer.
This church is so amazing. They're just a really neat group of people, and so they seem to love it. And they did my book launch for me, which was a huge Welsh tea. So they had Welsh tea cakes and Welsh pastries.
Oh, great.
That was
That's
awesome.
terrific.
Yeah, it was really terrific.
Yeah.
And
you must have really felt wonderful about
was
that.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And then when I sold books at the church that day, I gave all the profits to the church.
Of course.
So it was nice.
Yeah, and what about the church hierarchy? Does the United Church of Christ have a hierarchy?
They do, and I was talking to the conference minister, and he thought it was great. I mean, the UCC is very open and progressive, so if a pastor writes murder mysteries, that's just cool, That's nice.
And when you write, do you get inspiration when you write murder mystery? Do you get inspiration for your sermons?
Oh, no. I wish I did. Sometimes I've gotten inspiration for the book from my sermons, I think, from my reading of scripture and my understanding of how the church works. But I don't think the murder has ever inspired a sermon, although maybe,
Yeah.
Well, a couple of times I've written about the process of writing and then the process of understanding scripture, because some of it is the same.
Yes.
Like form follows function.
Yeah.
Is very much a part of understanding scripture, I think.
By the way, I just really enjoyed The Shadow of Death. Jane Willan has been our guest, Reverend of the United Church of Christ,
Right.
Church of Christ. And so good to have you with us. Thank you so much. This is New England Authors with Kameel Nasr. We're recorded here in Cambridge, Massachusetts, broadcast around New England. Remember, watch locally.